My name is Randy, 34 years old, a financial expert from humble beginnings. When I married Alexandra, from the billionaire Mitchell family, I knew they looked down on me. But nothing prepared me for that fateful dinner when her mother sneered, "Who let the maids sit at this table?" I stayed silent that night, but what they never expected was how I would quietly cancel their $500 million lifeline deal. Their empire was already cracking. Before I continue my story, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button, and brace yourself for what happened next. I grew up in a small town in Nebraska, where the horizon stretched farther than our family budget. My father worked at the local manufacturing plant for 30 years, coming home with calloused hands and a tired smile. My mother was a nurse at the community hospital, often working double shifts to help make ends meet. With two younger brothers to compete with for resources, I learned early that nothing in life comes easy. Our house was modest but warm, sitting on a quiet street with a small yard where Dad taught us how to throw a baseball. We never went hungry, but there were plenty of times when luxury meant a trip to the local diner on payday. Christmas gifts were practical rather than extravagant. New clothes came from discount stores, often a size too big so we could grow into them. But what we lacked in material possessions, we made up for in values. My parents instilled in us a strong work ethic, integrity, and the belief that education was our ticket to a better life. During high school, I balanced academics with every job I could find. I mowed lawns in summer, shoveled snow in winter, stocked shelves at the local grocery store, and delivered newspapers at dawn. Every dollar went into my college fund jar. While my friends were going to parties, I was working night shifts at the 24-hour gas station, studying calculus between customers. My hard work paid off when I was accepted to an Ivy League university with a partial scholarship. Still, I had to take out substantial student loans and work part-time throughout college. I majored in finance, fascinated by the flow of capital and the strategies that built empires from nothing. The contrast between my background and that of my wealthy classmates was stark. They drove luxury cars while I took the bus. They spent spring break in tropical locations, while I worked extra shifts to cover next semester's textbooks. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at a boutique brokerage firm in New York. My apartment was tiny, shared with two other graduates in a less desirable neighborhood. My suits were off the rack, but I made sure they were impeccably tailored to give the impression of quality. Image matters in finance, and I was determined to play the part despite my bank account. I worked 14-hour days, arriving before my boss and leaving after him. I volunteered for projects nobody wanted, absorbed knowledge like a sponge, and gradually built a reputation as someone who could spot opportunities others missed. By 28, I had moved up to senior analyst, then portfolio manager, handling accounts for wealthy clients who never questioned my background as long as I delivered results. It was at a charity gala for arts education that I first met Alexandra Mitchell. The event was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, with tickets costing $5,000 each. I was there representing my firm, instructed to network with potential clients. Alexandra stood near a Greek sculpture, looking bored with the small talk around her. She wore a simple black dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her dark hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. When our eyes met across the room, something clicked. I approached her with confidence born from years of faking it in rooms full of wealth. "The sculpture is disappointing up close, isn't it?" I said, nodding toward the marble figure. She looked surprised, then amused. "Everyone else is pretending to find it profound. I find honesty saves time," I replied. Her laugh was genuine, a stark contrast to the practiced chuckles around us. "Alexandra Mitchell," she said, extending her hand. "Randy Thompson," I replied, taking it. Only later did I learn that Alexandra Mitchell was the second daughter of the Mitchell family, controllers of a vast empire of luxury real estate, hotel chains, and exclusive resorts across 3 continents. She managed the family investment fund, doubling its value in just 5 years through smart, forward-thinking strategies. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant in the village, far from the upscale establishments her family frequented. I chose it deliberately, wanting to see if she could be comfortable in my world. She arrived in jeans and a sweater, ordered spaghetti and meatballs, and talked about books rather than business. By dessert, I was falling for her. Dating Alexandra was like living in two different worlds. When we were alone, we were equals, two people who connected on an intellectual and emotional level. But whenever her family appeared in the picture, I felt the weight of class difference pressing down on me. The first time I met Eleanor Mitchell, Alexandra's mother, was at a family dinner I was clearly not supposed to be invited to. Eleanor looked me up and down as if appraising livestock, then turned to Alexandra and said, "Darling, you didn't mention you were bringing a guest." The emphasis on guest made it clear what she really meant. Throughout dinner, Eleanor asked pointed questions about my family, my education, my career, each designed to highlight the gulf between our worlds. Rebecca, Alexandra's older sister and CEO of Mitchell Enterprises, was more directly hostile. "So you handle what, middle-class portfolios?" she asked with a smirk. Her husband James, the company's COO, spent the evening talking over me, explaining financial concepts I understood better than him as if I were a child. Only Alexandra's younger sister Sophia seemed indifferent to my presence, too absorbed in her phone and discussions about her latest shopping spree to care who her sister was dating. Despite the family's obvious disapproval, Alexandra and I grew closer. I loved her independence, her sharp mind, and her quiet rebellion against the expectations placed on her. She loved my straightforward nature, my drive, and perhaps the fact that I represented something different from the calculated world she grew up in. After 2 years of dating, I proposed to her on the rooftop of my apartment building, with a view of the city lights and a ring that cost 3 months of my salary. It wasn't the 5-carat diamond her family would expect, but Alexandra cried when she saw it, saying it was perfect. Our wedding was small by Mitchell standards, just 100 guests, instead of the 500-person extravaganza Rebecca had for her wedding. Eleanor attended with a tight smile, making it clear this was not the match she had hoped for. The Mitchell family sat together at a table, separate from my parents and brothers, barely acknowledging their existence. After the wedding, we honeymooned in Thailand, staying at boutique hotels rather than the Mitchell resort properties. Those 2 weeks were perfect, full of adventure, intimacy, and conversation about our future. Alexandra talked about wanting to start our own investment firm someday, something separate from her family legacy. I shared my dreams of creating a foundation to help kids from backgrounds like mine get financial education. As our plane landed back in New York, I was filled with hope. Despite the obstacles, I believed our love was strong enough to overcome the class divide. I had no idea how deeply the Mitchell family would test that belief, or how far I would go to protect my dignity when pushed to the breaking point. The Mitchell empire was more vast and complex than I initially realized. From the outside, people saw the gleaming towers of luxury condominiums in major cities, the exclusive hotel chain with properties in 30 countries, and the elite resorts where celebrities and politicians vacationed away from prying eyes. What remained hidden was the intricate web of shell companies, offshore accounts, and political connections that formed the true foundation of their wealth. Their flagship headquarters occupied the top 10 floors of a skyscraper in Manhattan, with views that made even seasoned executives catch their breath. The Mitchell name was embossed on everything from the elevator buttons to the bathroom fixtures. Walking through those halls felt like entering a different world, one where money wasn't just wealth but power made tangible. The family itself was a study in carefully cultivated perfection. Eleanor Mitchell, Alexandra's mother, had taken control of the empire after her husband Richard died of a heart attack 15 years earlier. At 62, she maintained the sharp beauty and composure of a woman who had never allowed herself to publicly display weakness. Her silver hair was always styled impeccably, her designer clothes chosen to project authority rather than draw attention. Behind her carefully applied makeup was a mind that could calculate risk and advantage with computer-like precision. Rebecca Mitchell, the eldest daughter at 38, had been groomed since childhood to eventually take her mother's place. As CEO, she ran daily operations with ruthless efficiency, Her Harvard MBA and years working in private equity before joining the family business gave her the credentials to be taken seriously in rooms full of male executives. She had her mother's height and poise, but none of her subtlety. Rebecca preferred direct intimidation to manipulation, making it clear to everyone that disappointing her would have immediate consequences. Her husband, James Harrison, served as the company COO. At 40, he embodied corporate ambition in human form. His background was impressive on paper: Northwestern undergraduate and Wharton MBA, followed by consulting at McKinsey, before marrying into the Mitchell family. What his resume didn't show was his talent for taking credit for others' work and shifting blame when projects failed. He and Rebecca had a 7-year-old son who was already being prepped for his future role in the company, attending board meetings before he could properly tie his shoes. Sophia Mitchell, the youngest at 27, had no official role in the business beyond spending its profits. She had cycled through 3 college majors before settling on art history, then abandoned her thesis to travel through Europe for a year. Her Instagram account, with 2 million followers, documented her jet-setting lifestyle and partnerships with luxury brands who paid handsomely for access to her audience. Behind her carefree exterior was a young woman desperately seeking her mother's approval while pretending not to care about it. Raymond Pierce, Eleanor's brother-in-law, served as the family's chief financial advisor. At 68, he had witnessed the Mitchell empire grow from a single luxury apartment building to a global brand. His loyalty was unquestionable, as was his willingness to bend rules to protect family interests. He viewed me with immediate suspicion, seeing in me perhaps a threat to the carefully constructed financial house of cards he had helped build. My first formal introduction to the entire family came 3 months after the wedding, at a dinner held at the Mitchell estate in the Hamptons. The property sprawled over 8 acres of oceanfront land, with a main house that could comfortably hold 50 guests and still feel empty. The driveway alone was longer than the street I grew up on. Eleanor greeted us at the door with air kisses for Alexandra and a limp handshake for me. "Alexandra, darling, that dress is lovely." "Valentino?" she said, completely ignoring my presence after the obligatory greeting. "Actually, it is a local designer Randy introduced me to," Alexandra replied, squeezing my hand. Eleanor's smile tightened. "How? Unique. Everyone is in the main sitting room." The sitting room looked like something from a historical drama, with antique furniture that probably cost more than my parents' house. Original artwork hung on walls, casually displayed as if they were family photos rather than museum-worthy pieces. "Randy," Rebecca called from across the room, "tell us about growing up in Nebraska, was it? I always find it fascinating how people live in those flyover states." "We managed to have electricity and running water," I replied with a smile, trying to keep things light. "And what did your father do again?" James asked, swirling his 18-year-old scotch. "He worked at the manufacturing plant for 30 years. Honest work that helped put me through college." "How quaint," Sophia murmured, not looking up from her phone. "Mother, did you see what the Worthingtons did with their new yacht? Simply tragic. They should have consulted us on the interior design." Throughout the evening, the conversation repeatedly circled back to topics that highlighted my outsider status. They discussed people I didn't know, events I hadn't attended, and inside jokes I couldn't possibly understand. When I tried to contribute to a discussion about market trends, James talked over me, explaining basic concepts I had mastered years ago. "Randy, Alexandra tells us you work in finance," Raymond said during dinner, his tone suggesting he was humoring a child. "What exactly do you handle? Personal accounts? Retirement planning?" Before I could answer, Rebecca chimed in. "Alexandra, remember Thomas Blackwood? His family's shipping business is doing remarkably well. He asked about you at the charity gala last month." "Thomas is married with 2 children," Alexandra replied flatly. "Well, marriages can be reconsidered when better options present themselves," Eleanor said, staring directly at me. Alexandra defended me, but her rebuttals were gentle, conciliatory. "Mother, Randy has an exceptional track record with his investment strategies. His firm has consistently outperformed market averages." "Anyone can get lucky in a bull market," James countered. As the evening wore on, I noticed the glances exchanged between family members, subtle eye rolls when I spoke, and the way conversations shifted when I approached groups. I was being tolerated, not accepted. After dinner, I excused myself to use the restroom. Taking a wrong turn in the massive house, I overheard voices from a partially open door. "How long do you think this will last?" It was Rebecca's voice. "Not long," Eleanor replied. "Alexandra has always gone through phases. Remember her rebellious vegetarian period in college? This is just another way of asserting independence." "We need to accelerate things," James added. "I have some contacts who could offer him a position overseas. Something too good to refuse." "Patience," Eleanor cautioned. "Push too hard, and she'll dig in her heels. We need to make him feel unwelcome without being obvious about it." I quietly backed away, my stomach nodding. On the drive home, Alexandra chatted happily about how well the evening had gone, completely oblivious to the undercurrents I had detected. That night, lying awake beside her sleeping form, I realized that my marriage would be a constant battle against forces determined to see it fail. 6 months into our marriage, Alexandra approached me with what she thought was wonderful news. "Randy, I have been thinking," she said over breakfast in our Manhattan apartment. "You should come work for Mitchell Enterprises. We have an opening for a senior financial advisor, and your expertise would be perfect." I nearly choked on my coffee. "You want me to work for your family? The same family that can barely stand to be in the same room with me?" Alexandra reached across the table to take my hand. "That is exactly why this is a good idea. If they see your value professionally, they will come to respect you personally. You know finance better than anyone I know, even better than Uncle Raymond. Your mother and sister will never approve of this," I pointed out. "I already discussed it with them," she admitted. "They had concerns, but I convinced them to give you a chance." What Alexandra didn't tell me then, but I would learn later, was that those concerns had been vociferous objections. Eleanor had threatened to remove Alexandra from her position in the company, while Rebecca had argued that bringing me in would damage their reputation with long-standing clients. Only Alexandra's threat to withdraw completely from the family business had forced their reluctant agreement. My first day at Mitchell Enterprises set the tone for what would follow. Instead of the corner office typically assigned to someone of my nominal rank, I was given a small workspace on a lower floor, far from the executive suite and the center of operations. My orientation consisted of a 20-minute meeting with an HR representative who seemed uncomfortable with my presence. The company directory listed me as financial consultant rather than senior financial advisor, the title Alexandra had mentioned. When I raised this discrepancy with HR, I was told it was a temporary designation until my role was more clearly defined. In meetings, my contributions were either ignored or attributed to others. James had a particular talent for restating my ideas minutes after I shared them, receiving nods of approval from those around the table. Critical information was shared accidentally after decisions had already been made, making it impossible for me to provide timely input. "Sorry, Randy. We assumed Alexandra would have briefed you on that," became a common refrain, despite Alexandra being kept equally in the dark about many matters. The staff took their cues from upper management. Administrative assistants forgot to include me on email chains. Lunch invitations mysteriously never reached me. When I entered the break room, conversations would suddenly shift to bland topics like weather and sports. Despite these obstacles, I began to notice concerning patterns in the company's operations. Financial reports seemed deliberately opaque, with key metrics buried in footnotes or omitted entirely. Project budgets showed significant discrepancies between allocated and utilized funds. The company's debt load was much higher than publicly acknowledged, with several high-interest loans hidden within subsidiary companies. Most concerning were the transactions overseen directly by James and Raymond. Millions of dollars moved through a series of shell companies before ultimately returning to Mitchell Enterprises accounts, stripped of their origins and tax obligations. Vendor contracts were awarded to companies with obscure ownership structures that, with enough digging, led back to friends or distant relatives of the Mitchell family. 3 months into my employment, I discovered the true reason for my opportunity at Mitchell Enterprises. The family's flagship development, a luxury resort and residential complex in Singapore, was hemorrhaging money. Construction costs had ballooned to nearly twice the initial estimates. Environmental regulations had required expensive last-minute modifications, and the projected sales of residential units had fallen far short of targets. This single project threatened to destabilize the entire Mitchell empire. The company had leveraged existing properties to finance the development, creating a dangerous house of cards. If the Singapore project failed, creditors could potentially claim key Mitchell assets around the world. I spent weeks analyzing the situation, working late into the night after everyone else had gone home. The company needed a major cash infusion, at least $500 million, to stabilize the project and prevent a cascade of financial disasters. But traditional lenders were already growing wary of the Mitchell name, sensing trouble beneath the glossy surface. That was when I remembered Takashi Yamamoto, a Japanese investor I had worked with at my previous firm. Takashi represented a consortium of Asian technology billionaires looking to diversify into Western real estate. They had capital to deploy and were willing to take calculated risks for the right opportunity. I reached out to Takashi directly, circumventing the company's usual channels. After several preliminary discussions, he expressed genuine interest in the Singapore project, seeing potential where others saw disaster. The location was ideal for his investors' interests, and with proper management, the development could still become profitable. Over the next month, I prepared a comprehensive proposal for Takashi and his group. I was honest about the project's troubles, but presented a clear path to profitability. I created financial models showing realistic returns, based on revised timelines and marketing strategies. I outlined governance changes that would streamline decision-making and reduce wasteful spending. When the proposal was complete, I shared it with Alexandra, swearing her to secrecy until we had Takashi's firm commitment. She was ecstatic, seeing in this not just a business solution, but a personal validation. "This is brilliant, Randy," she said, poring over the documents. $500 million would solve everything. Mother and Rebecca will have to acknowledge your value after this. Let us not get ahead of ourselves, I cautioned. Takashi wants to meet the family before making a final decision. That meeting needs to go perfectly. Alexandra squeezed my hand. It will, I promise. I will make them understand how important this is. They will be on their best behavior. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. The alternative was watching my career at Mitchell Enterprises end before it truly began. More than that, I feared what failure would mean for my marriage. If I couldn't prove my worth to Alexandra's family, how long before she began to question it herself? With Takashi's preliminary agreement secured, Alexandra arranged a formal dinner at the Mitchell estate to finalize the deal. Eleanor and Rebecca were initially skeptical, but quickly changed their tune when they understood the stakes. $500 million could buy a lot of politeness, even from the Mitchells. As the dinner approached, I rehearsed my presentation obsessively, anticipating every possible question and objection. Alexandra assured me repeatedly that her family recognized the importance of this opportunity. This was my chance to change everything, to transform from unwelcome outsider to valuable ally. If only I had recognized the warning signs. If only I had prepared for betrayal rather than mere skepticism. But I was still naive enough to believe that shared interest would overcome personal animosity. I was about to learn how wrong I could be. The Mitchell estate glowed with warm light against the evening sky as cars delivered guests for what Eleanor had termed a small, intimate gathering of 30 people. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic patterns across marble floors. White-gloved staff circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres, and de four. A string quartet played softly in the corner of the grand salon. This was no ordinary business dinner. Eleanor had orchestrated every detail to showcase the Mitchell family's wealth and sophistication to Takashi Yamamoto and his associates. The guest list included key Mitchell executives, board members, and select financial partners whose presence would reinforce the family's standing and connections. I arrived with Alexandra an hour early, at her insistence. She wore a burgundy dress that complemented her dark hair, while I had purchased a new charcoal suit specifically for the occasion. As we entered, Eleanor intercepted us, pulling Alexandra aside for a quick word that lasted 15 minutes. When Alexandra returned, her smile seemed strained. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Of course," she replied too quickly. "Mother just wanted to review the seating arrangements." Takashi arrived precisely on time, accompanied by 2 associates. At 58, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. He greeted me warmly, clasping my hand in both of his. "Randy, good to see you again. I have been reviewing your proposal in detail. Very impressive analysis." Eleanor swooped in, inserting herself between us. "Mr. Yamamoto, welcome to our home. I am Eleanor Mitchell, Alexandra's mother and chairwoman of Mitchell Enterprises. Pleased to meet you," Takashi replied with a slight bow. "Randy speaks very highly of your organization." A flicker of annoyance crossed Eleanor's face at the mention of my name. "Yes, well, we are fortunate to have such diverse perspectives in our company. Please, let me introduce you to our CEO, my daughter Rebecca, and our COO, James Harrison." For the next 30 minutes, Eleanor monopolized Takashi, steering him around the room to meet everyone except me. I stayed near the periphery, watching as James dominated the conversation with grand statements about Mitchell Enterprises' vision and future prospects. Whenever Takashi asked specific questions about the Singapore project, James deflected with vague assurances. "The temporary setbacks are merely growing pains," he declared with manufactured confidence. "With the right partner, the potential is unlimited." Takashi nodded politely, but caught my eye across the room. I could see his skepticism growing with each evasive answer. When dinner was announced, I discovered that despite my central role in bringing Takashi to the table, I had been seated at the opposite end from him and the key decision-makers. Alexandra was placed between Takashi and Eleanor, with Rebecca and James flanking them. My chair was sandwiched between 2 junior executives, who seemed as confused by the arrangement as I was. Throughout the first course, I watched helplessly as the family presented a version of the Singapore project that bore little resemblance to the honest assessment I had given Takashi. Problems were minimized, projections were inflated, and timelines were shortened beyond any realistic expectation. When Takashi mentioned specific concerns I had outlined in my proposal, James interrupted smoothly. "I believe there has been some miscommunication. Those issues have already been addressed in our revised plan." No such revised plan existed. I tried to catch Alexandra's eye, but she was engaged in conversation with Takashi's associate. The dinner was slipping away from me, along with any chance of securing the investment. Midway through the main course, I excused myself and approached Takashi's side of the table, intending to quietly correct some of the misinformation being shared. As I leaned in to speak with him, James accidentally bumped a waiter's arm, sending a full glass of red wine cascading down the front of my new suit. "Oh my, how clumsy," James said with false concern as the room fell silent. "Randy, you should get cleaned up immediately. Cannot have you sitting through dinner like that." Mortified but maintaining composure, I excused myself to find a bathroom. One of the staff directed me to a powder room, where I spent 10 minutes dabbing at the stain with cold water, knowing it was a futile effort. When I returned to the dining room, I discovered my seat had been moved. Not just relocated at the same table, but completely transferred to a smaller table in the corner where the Mitchell family's personal assistants and lower-ranking staff were seated. My place setting, wine glass, and even my half-eaten appetizer had been whisked away as if I had never been part of the main table. Confusion and anger rising, I approached the main table. "There seems to be a mistake with the seating," I said quietly to Alexandra. Before she could respond, Sophia looked up from her phone, her voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet room. "Oh, look, the new servant is confused about where to sit." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the guests. Alexandra's face flushed, but she remained silent, staring down at her plate. Eleanor turned to me, her expression one of practiced disdain. Her voice was pitched to Carrie. "Who let the maid sit at this table? Really, the help should know their place." Rebecca added with a cold smile. "People like him should be standing to serve, not sitting among us." James joined in, his corporate mask slipping to reveal the cruelty beneath. What can you expect from someone with his background? Probably learned finance from a community college textbook. The room had gone completely silent. Every eye was on me, waiting for my reaction. Takashi's expression had shifted from confusion to disgust, though I wasn't sure if it was directed at me or my tormentors. In that moment, I had a choice. I could explode in justified anger, creating a scene that would confirm their portrayal of me as uncouth and unsuitable. I could slink away to the corner table, accepting my designated place in their hierarchy, or I could maintain my dignity in the face of deliberate humiliation. I chose the third option. With a calm I didn't feel, I straightened my wine-stained jacket and addressed the table. I see I've misunderstood my role this evening. Please continue your discussion. Excuse me. Without another word, I walked out of the dining room, through the grand foyer, and into the cool night air. The valet looked surprised when I requested my car, clearly not expecting anyone to leave so early. As I drove away from the estate, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, I wasn't yet thinking of revenge. I was too overwhelmed by the public humiliation, the betrayal by Alexandra's silence, and the realization that no achievement would ever make me acceptable to the Mitchell family. What I didn't know then was that Takashi had watched my departure with growing unease. The Mitchell family's treatment of me had revealed a character flaw he couldn't ignore. A family that would publicly humiliate someone instrumental to their success was not a family he could trust with $500 million of his investors' money. The seeds of the Mitchell empire's downfall had been planted at that dinner table. And despite my hurt and anger, I would soon be the one to water them. I arrived home hours before Alexandra, giving me plenty of time to process what had happened. Our apartment, though luxurious by normal standards, felt like a poor imitation of Mitchell grandeur, a constant reminder that we lived in a world created by her family's wealth. I poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon and sat in darkness, replaying the evening's humiliation over and over. It was past midnight when I heard the key in the lock. Alexandra entered quietly, as if hoping to find me asleep. When she saw me sitting in the dim light of a single lamp, she froze. "Randy, I have been calling you for hours," she said, setting down her purse. "Why did you leave like that?" The calm in my voice surprised even me. Why did I leave? After being publicly humiliated by your family? After being literally removed from the table like an unwanted pet? After you sat there and said nothing? "It was not like that," she protested weakly. "You are overreacting. Mother was just being. Mother, you know how she is." "And how exactly is she, Alexandra? Cruel, elitist, or just a garden-variety sociopath?" "That is not fair." She was under pressure. "This deal means everything to the company." Alexandra paced the room, avoiding my gaze. "I did not want to make a scene and risk upsetting Mr. Yamamoto. So instead you let them sacrifice my dignity to avoid rocking the boat? What was I supposed to do?" Her voice rose. "Stand up and create a family drama in front of our most important potential investor?" "Yes!" I slammed my glass down. "That is exactly what you should have done. As my wife, as my partner. You should have chosen me." Alexandra's shoulders slumped. "It is complicated, Randy. The company is in trouble. Serious trouble. If this deal falls through, thousands of people could lose their jobs. My family could lose everything. And that justifies how they treated me? No, of course not, but..." She hesitated. "My position in the company is already precarious because I married you. Mother and Rebecca tolerate me because I am useful. If I challenge them too directly, I will lose what little influence I have." The truth finally emerged. "So you brought me into the company knowing I would be a punching bag? Knowing they would never accept me? I thought they would see your value. I thought you could prove yourself to them." Tears filled her eyes. "I was trying to protect both of us, our future, by sacrificing me to appease them. That is not fair. No. What is not fair is watching my wife sit silently while her family treats me like dirt." I stood up, suddenly exhausted. "I am going to bed. We can talk more tomorrow." But as I lay awake that night, my mind was already shifting from hurt to calculation. The Mitchell family had shown their true colors, not just to me but to Takashi Yamamoto. And in doing so, They had handed me the power to hurt them in return. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Once Alexandra had left for the office, I placed a call to Takashi's private number. "Randy," he answered on the second ring. "I was hoping to hear from you. Last night was unfortunate. I want to apologize for leaving abruptly," I began, maintaining professionalism despite my roiling emotions. "No apology necessary," Takashi replied. "If anything, I admired your restraint. Few would have handled such treatment with comparable dignity." This opening gave me the courage to continue. "Takashi, before you make any decisions about the investment, there are some things you should know about Mitchell Enterprises. Things I wasn't at liberty to share before." "I am listening," he said, his tone serious. Over the next hour, I laid out the true state of the Mitchell empire. I detailed the actual scale of the Singapore project's problems, far worse than what I had initially disclosed. I explained the web of shell companies used to hide debt and avoid taxes. I revealed the personal spending habits of family members that drained company resources, from Sophia's $3 million annual lifestyle allowance to James's habit of using company jets for golf weekends. "The $500 million you're considering investing won't save the Singapore project," I concluded. "It will temporarily plug a hole in a sinking ship, buying them time to find another investor to deceive." Takashi was silent for a long moment. "Why are you telling me this now, Randy? You stand to lose much by betraying your wife's family. Because you deserve the truth, and because I cannot be part of their deception any longer." "I appreciate your honesty," Takashi said finally. "It confirms suspicions I began forming last night. A family that treats its own with such disrespect cannot be trusted with others' money." After ending the call with Takashi, I made a series of other contacts. I reached out to 3 major creditors of Mitchell Enterprises, ostensibly to discuss refinancing options. In each conversation, I dropped carefully worded concerns about the company's liquidity and the Singapore project's viability. Next, I contacted a former colleague who now worked at a competing development firm. I suggested his company might be interested in acquiring certain Mitchell properties when they inevitably come on the market in the near future. The rumor would spread quickly through the industry. Finally, I called a financial journalist I had provided background information to in the past. I mentioned hearing about significant investor unrest regarding Mitchell Enterprises and suggested she might want to look into their recent project delays and executive departures. None of these actions constituted explicit betrayal. I never shared confidential documents or specific insider information. I merely planted seeds of doubt in fertile soil, knowing they would grow into something much larger. The final piece fell into place that afternoon when Takashi called me back. "Randy, I have decided not to proceed with the Mitchell investment," he said. "However, I am very interested in another opportunity. One of my investors is looking to acquire a stake in a boutique hotel chain in North America. Given your expertise, would you be interested in consulting on this project? Separately from your position at Mitchell Enterprises, of course." "I would be very interested," I replied, understanding the subtext. Takashi was offering me an exit strategy, a way to land on my feet when the Mitchell empire began to crumble. "Excellent. I will have my team send over the details. And Randy, I hope you understand that I will not mention our conversation to the Mitchells. As far as they are concerned, I simply found their proposition unsuitable for my investors." "I appreciate your discretion," I said. By the time Alexandra returned home that evening, looking exhausted and worried, the wheels were already in motion. She collapsed onto the couch beside me, kicking off her heels. "Takashi Yamamoto called Mother today," she said without preamble. "He is not going forward with the investment." I feigned surprise. "Did he say why?" "Only that the opportunity didn't align with his investors' current priorities." She rubbed her temples. "Mother is furious. She is blaming everyone, including you, for misrepresenting the opportunity to him. That's unfair. I presented the project honestly." "I know, but she needs someone to blame." Alexandra leaned against me. "This is bad, Randy. Really bad. Without Takashi's investment, we need to find another solution quickly." I put my arm around her, feeling a complex mix of guilt, satisfaction, and resolve. "Something will work out," I said, knowing exactly the opposite was true. Over the next few days, the seeds I had planted began to sprout. The Financial Journalist published an article questioning Mitchell Enterprises' project delays and rumored cash flow problems. 2 creditors called in loans earlier than expected, citing changed risk assessments. Competitors began circling, reaching out to key Mitchell clients and employees with enticing offers. Within a week, Mitchell Enterprises' carefully constructed facade of invulnerability had developed its first visible cracks. The stage was set for a much larger collapse, one that would force the family to confront not just their financial vulnerabilities, but their moral ones as well. As I watched events unfold from my increasingly isolated position within the company, I felt no joy in their troubles. Only a grim satisfaction that those who had deemed me unworthy would soon learn the true cost of their arrogance. The Mitchell empire did not collapse all at once. Like all seemingly solid structures with rotten foundations, it crumbled gradually at first, then with increasing speed as each falling piece knocked loose others. 1 week after Takashi withdrew his investment offer, Mitchell Enterprises' stock price dropped 15% on rumors of liquidity problems. Analysts who had long accepted the company's optimistic projections suddenly began asking harder questions about debt levels and project timelines. By the end of the second week, the stock had fallen another 25%. Sophia's Instagram posts from a shopping spree in Paris generated public backlash, with commenters questioning her spending while the company floundered. Clients began delaying payments, citing concerns about project completion. Vendors demanded upfront payments, no longer willing to extend credit. The Mitchell family compound became a war room. Eleanor summoned the family and top executives for an emergency strategy session that stretched late into the night. I was conspicuously not invited, but Alexandra returned home after midnight, her face drawn with worry. "It was awful," she told me, kicking off her shoes and collapsing onto our bed. "Mother kept saying this has to be sabotage, that someone is spreading lies about us." Rebecca suggested we sue the financial blog that published those rumors. James wants to issue a press release claiming the Singapore project is ahead of schedule, even though anyone who visits the site can see it is not. "What do you think should be done?" I asked carefully. "The truth would be a start," she sighed. "We are in serious trouble, Randy. Without that $500 million investment, we cannot meet our obligations past the next quarter." No one was willing to say it out loud, but bankruptcy is a real possibility. I feigned concern while feeling the weight of my actions. This was what I had wanted, wasn't it? To see the mighty Mitchells brought low, humbled by the consequences of their arrogance and cruelty? Yet seeing Alexandra's distress gave me no satisfaction. The third week brought a new wave of disasters. 2 board members resigned, citing personal reasons that everyone recognized as rats fleeing a sinking ship. A scheduled bond offering was postponed indefinitely after receiving tepid interest from institutional investors. The company's credit rating was downgraded, triggering acceleration clauses in several loan agreements. The Singapore government announced an investigation into potential environmental violations at the Mitchell development site, freezing all construction. Photographs of half-completed luxury villas surrounded by muddy construction pits circulated in business publications, becoming symbols of the company's fall from grace. Eleanor called another emergency meeting, this time in the company boardroom rather than the family home. When Alexandra prepared to leave for it, I surprised her by putting on my suit jacket. "What are you doing?" she asked. "I am coming with you. Randy, you were not invited. Mother specifically said family only. Last I checked, I am family, and I might be the only person who can help at this point." Alexandra looked conflicted but didn't argue further. When we arrived at the Mitchell Enterprises headquarters, the security guard's eyes widened at my presence, but he let us pass. The boardroom was a study in barely contained panic. Eleanor sat at the head of the table, her usually perfect appearance showing signs of strain. Rebecca paced near the floor-to-ceiling windows, barking orders into her phone. James stared at spreadsheets with growing desperation. Sophia, for once, wasn't on her phone but instead biting her manicured nails. Raymond Pierce shuffled papers nervously, his usual confidence nowhere to be seen. When I entered behind Alexandra, the room fell silent. "What is he doing here?" Eleanor demanded. "This is a family matter." "He is my husband," Alexandra replied, more firmly than I had ever heard her speak to her mother. "And he understands finance better than anyone in this room." "Your husband," Rebecca sneered, "has been suspiciously quiet while our company falls apart. One might almost think he is enjoying our troubles." "That is ridiculous," Alexandra began, but I placed a hand on her arm. "Actually," I said calmly, taking a seat at the table, "I have been giving this situation a lot of thought, and I believe I know exactly when things started going wrong." "Enlighten us," James said sarcastically. I looked around the table, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. "It started going wrong at that dinner with Takashi Yamamoto. When you decided that humiliating me was more important than securing the investment that could have saved your company." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "How dare you?" Eleanor began, but I cut her off. "How dare I? How dare you treat me like dirt after I brought you the one investor who could have pulled you out of the hole you dug yourselves into? How dare you move my seat to the servants' table and mock my background in front of everyone?" "We were under pressure," Rebecca protested weakly. "And your response to pressure is to attack someone trying to help you? What does that say about your character? About your fitness to lead?" Alexandra stared at me, understanding dawning in her eyes. "Randy, what did you do?" I turned to her, feeling the weight of my actions. I told Takashi the truth, the whole truth about Mitchell Enterprises, about the debt, the shell companies, the tax evasion, about how the Singapore project is actually 18 months behind schedule, not the 6 months reported to investors. "You betrayed us?" Eleanor's voice was deadly quiet. "No, you betrayed me first. I simply stopped protecting people who showed me exactly how little they valued my loyalty." Raymond slammed his hand on the table. "This is corporate espionage. We could have you arrested." "For what? Telling an investor the truth?" "I disclosed no confidential documents. I shared no proprietary information. I merely corrected the misleading statements you made at dinner." I leaned forward. "But I did make sure certain creditors became aware of your actual financial situation. And I might have mentioned to some competitors that certain Mitchell properties could soon be available at distressed prices." The silence that followed was absolute. "Why?" Alexandra finally whispered. "Why would you destroy everything my family built?" I turned to her, feeling the full weight of what my actions might cost us. "Because they made it clear I would never be accepted, no matter what I contributed. Because they humiliated me publicly, and you sat by and let it happen. Because they deserve to face consequences for once in their privileged lives." Eleanor's composure finally cracked. "Do you have any idea what you have done? Thousands of people work for this company. Families depend on us. Projects around the world will be abandoned. All because your feelings were hurt at a dinner party? Don't you dare minimize it," I shot back. "You have spent every moment since I married Alexandra trying to undermine me, belittle me, and push me out. You never gave me a chance because of where I came from, never looked past your own prejudice to see what I could offer. Well, now you are seeing it, just not in the way you expected." Rebecca's cold facade had crumbled into naked fear. "Can you fix this? Can you call Takashi back? Tell him you were mistaken?" "It is far too late for that," I replied. "The damage is done. Mitchell Enterprises as you know it is finished." Alexandra stood up suddenly. "I need air," she said, walking quickly from the room. I followed her to the rooftop garden, a luxury space where executives usually entertained clients. She stood at the railing, looking out over the city, wind whipping her hair. "I do not know who you are anymore," she said without turning. "The man I married would not have done this. The woman I married would not have sat silently while her family degraded me." She finally turned to face me. "I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. I should have defended you. But this? Destroying my family's company? Threatening thousands of jobs? This is not proportional, Randy." "You are right," I admitted. "It is not proportional. But I did not start this war. I simply finished it. Alexandra wiped away tears. So what happens now? Do we just watch everything burn? I took a deep breath. Now I offer them a choice. We returned to the boardroom, where the family sat in stunned silence. I took my seat and laid out my proposal. Mitchell Enterprises can still be saved, but not as it exists now. Here is what needs to happen. Eleanor and Rebecca resign from their positions. James is removed entirely, and a full investigation is conducted into his financial dealings. Raymond retires with no golden parachute. The company undergoes complete restructuring, with transparent financial reporting and corporate governance. And who would lead this new, reformed company? Eleanor asked bitterly. I would, temporarily. Just long enough to stabilize things and implement the necessary changes. This is extortion, Rebecca spat. This is your only option, I countered. Otherwise, I walk away and let the creditors pick over what is left. Your choice. The family erupted into arguments, accusations, and recriminations. Through it all, Alexandra remained silent, her eyes fixed on me, as if seeing me for the first time. After hours of heated discussion, Eleanor finally spoke the words that must have tasted like ashes in her mouth. We accept your terms. But it wasn't a victory. Not really. As I looked at Alexandra's troubled expression, I realized that winning this battle might cost me something far more valuable than any corporate triumph. The weeks following that fateful boardroom confrontation were among the most challenging of my life. By day, I worked tirelessly to save what could be salvaged of Mitchell Enterprises. By night, I returned to an increasingly silent home, where Alexandra and I circled each other like wary strangers. The restructuring was painful but necessary. Eleanor announced her retirement, citing health concerns to save face. Rebecca was relegated to a non-executive board position with limited authority. James resigned amid an internal investigation into financial improprieties, later facing criminal charges for embezzlement. Raymond took early retirement, his reputation in tatters. I took on the role of interim CEO, working 16-hour days to reassure investors, renegotiate with creditors, and stabilize operations. We sold off underperforming assets, streamlined management, and implemented rigorous financial controls. The Singapore project was scaled back to realistic proportions, with local partners brought in to share costs and risks. Throughout this period, Alexandra remained distant. She continued to work at the company, focusing on the charitable foundation she had always championed, but our personal relationship existed in a strange limbo. We lived together, but rarely spoke beyond necessary logistics. We shared a bed, but not our thoughts or feelings. The turning point came 3 months into the restructuring. I returned home late to find Alexandra sitting at our kitchen table, a single glass of wine in front of her. I have been thinking about what you said, she began without preamble, about how I should have chosen you at that dinner. You were right. I should have. I was a coward. I sat down across from her, exhausted from another long day. I was angry when I said that, but you meant it, and you were right. She took a sip of wine. I have spent my entire life trying to please my mother, to earn Rebecca's respect, to be a good Mitchell. I forgot how to be a good partner, a good person. I went too far, I admitted. The company could have been reformed without such drastic measures. I wanted to hurt them because they hurt me. That was wrong. Alexandra reached across the table and took my hand. We both made mistakes, but I have made a decision. I am choosing you now, Randy. Whatever that means, whatever happens with the company or my family, I am choosing us. Her words broke something inside me, a dam holding back emotions I had suppressed for months. I thought I had lost you. You almost did. But watching you these past months, seeing how you have worked to save jobs rather than just destroy what my family built, I realized something. You are a better person than any of us. Better than me. That is not true. It is. You had every reason to walk away and let everything collapse. Instead, you stayed and fixed our mistakes. That takes real strength, real character. We talked through the night, truly honest with each other perhaps for the first time. Alexandra shared her lifetime of emotional manipulation at her mother's hands, the constant pressure to put family legacy above personal happiness. I confessed my deep insecurities about my background and my fear that she would eventually see me as unworthy. By morning, we had reached a decision. Once Mitchell Enterprises was stabilized, we would both leave. The company would continue under professional management, with the family maintaining ownership but not operational control. We would start something new together, something that reflected our shared values rather than the Mitchell legacy. Over the next 9 months, I worked to make myself obsolete. We hired a respected CEO from outside the industry, established a strong board with independent directors, and implemented governance structures that would prevent future abuses. The company emerged smaller but healthier, with a sustainable business model and transparent finances. Throughout this period, my relationship with the Mitchell family evolved in unexpected ways. Eleanor, stripped of her corporate power, gradually revealed a more human side. Our conversations, initially tense and formal, slowly became more genuine. She would never love me as a son, but she began to respect me as a person. You know, she said during one of our weekly progress meetings, Richard, Alexandra's father, came from nothing too. I sometimes think I spent decades trying to erase that part of our history, to pretend we had always been elite. It was foolish pride. Rebecca remained cold and distant, unable to forgive me for what she saw as a betrayal. James, facing legal consequences for his actions, tried to drag others down with him but found few sympathetic ears. Sophia, surprisingly, adapted best to the family's changed circumstances, discovering a previously untapped talent for marketing and throwing herself into rebuilding the brand's image. On my last day as CEO, I handed over the keys to my office with a profound sense of relief. Alexandra waited for me in the lobby, ready to begin our new chapter. We had already incorporated our own investment firm, focused on funding socially responsible businesses in underserved communities. The healing process was neither quick nor easy. For months, I carried anger like a stone in my chest, replaying the humiliation of that dinner in my mind. I attended therapy, something I would have scoffed at before, and gradually learned to distinguish between healthy ambition and vengeful driving forces. Alexandra faced her own journey, learning to establish boundaries with her family and recognize the dysfunctional patterns she had internalized. Together, we built something neither of us could have created alone, a partnership based on mutual respect and shared purpose. 2 years after the restructuring, our firm had established a solid reputation for ethical investment and community impact. We worked with entrepreneurs from backgrounds like mine, people with talent and drive but without the connections that typically open doors in finance. Each success story felt like a validation of my belief that worth is not determined by birth or background. Looking back on that tumultuous period, I recognize now what I couldn't see then. True success isn't measured by defeating those who wrong you. It isn't found in the momentary satisfaction of revenge or in proving critics wrong. Real success comes from remaining true to your values, even when tested, from building rather than destroying, from finding the strength to forgive without forgetting. The Mitchell family never fully accepted me, and perhaps they never will. But I no longer need their acceptance to validate my worth. My legacy will not be the near destruction of their empire, but what I choose to create with my own hands, guided by my own moral compass. If you are watching this and facing your own battles against prejudice or elitism, remember that your response to mistreatment defines you more than the mistreatment itself. Choose dignity over vengeance. Choose creation over destruction. And most importantly, surround yourself with people who value you for who you are, not what you can do for them or where you come from. I would love to hear your stories of overcoming similar challenges in the comments below. Have you ever been judged based on your background rather than your abilities? How did you respond? Please like this video if my experience resonated with you. Subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming adversity, and share with someone who might need to hear this message today. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your worth is not determined by others' perception of you, but by the integrity with which you live your life.